Loving kindness refers to the cultivation of a sincere wish for the happiness and well-being of all sentient beings. Metta meditation or metta bhavana, again the cultivation or development of loving kindness, comes to us from an ancient Buddhist discourse called the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This kind of training is designed to help us develop and embody the attitudes of goodwill, friendliness, kindness, and benevolence in relation to those around us and also toward ourselves. So when we practice in this way, we begin by extending this quality and feeling toward ourselves. We then gradually begin to project or radiate that feeling toward our loved ones, neutral individuals, individuals with whom we may have difficulty, and eventually to all sentient beings. As its principal effect, it serves to reduce any feelings of hatred or ill will, which can be a common obstacle to our being established in mindfulness. As such, metta or loving kindness becomes a useful tool for supporting and increasing the effect of our overall mindfulness practice. In its most detailed exposition, the mode of radiation or sending is said to be achievable in multiple ways. And so it's useful to have an idea of these, because the idea of sending a feeling can be quite alien to many of us at first. And so when we have an idea of the different ways that we are able to send loving kindness, we can experiment and find the one that feels more natural and intuitive to us. So we can divide these into three categories then. We have unspecified radiation, which is sending toward beings in general categories. We have specified radiation, which involves the sending toward beings in specified categories, for example, based on species or something like this. And then we have directional radiation, which is ascending toward any being that may be abiding in a particular area or location. For greater efficiency, each category can be divided into further subcategories. And so for general or unspecified radiation, then, we have 5 different subcategories: all beings, all living things, all creatures, all persons, and all embodied beings. Now, we may notice that many of these subcategories almost seem to refer to the same thing, and this is intentional. The general idea here is to emphasize complete universality and non-discrimination. That is, we are not supposed to be excluding any being from our contemplation based on things like gender or class, religion or species. And so we can see here again this thread of non-judgment that pervades the cultivation of mindfulness in general and all of its auxiliary methods. Moving on to specified radiation then, here we see what appears to be a contrasting mode of sending, where we do target certain kinds of being depending upon their type. Now, the original subcategories in this class are a little against the times. However, it is reasonable to assert that in practice, these groups can be as specific and as exhaustive as you like. And so you can think of things like species or individuals who may be in difficult circumstances. And now we may be thinking, well, doesn't this necessitate excluding certain beings? And were we not just trying to avoid this exact thing? Well, the answer is slightly yes, but conclusively no. Why? Well, because what these specified categories help us to do is target the practice more efficiently. For example, we may have certain groups that we feel a particular resistance towards, and this helps us to hone in on where our disconnection actually lies. And so it helps us to train the mind to overcome things like unconscious or conscious bias. So it's not the case that just because we are radiating or sending to a particular kind of being or a particular kind of individual, that its function is less universal. And this brings us to our third and final set of subcategories, which is directional radiation. And this one is my particular favorite. Why? Well, because it can be hard sometimes to identify which category we want to focus on. Where do we want to send loving kindness? In addition to this, if we practice metta through something like a guided meditation, these pre-recorded practices never really go into much detail. They will rarely specify all of the different categories and subcategories of being. What's perhaps more important is that for the average working person or student, it is simply not practical. And so directional radiation gives us the option to simply choose a direction in which we want to extend the intention. In the original discourse, 10 directions are outlined, and these are obvious: north, east, south, and west, northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest, and up or down. Again, we don't need to do all of these individually. I personally like to almost visualize a ball that expands from the heart center and just continues to increase before encompassing the whole body and extending out into the wider world. All we have to remember is that the general idea is to use direction as a tool through which we can refine our contemplation and solidify the attitudes of non-discrimination, non-judgment, and boundless concern. And so when we actually practice metta or loving kindness meditation, we don't need to be stressing ourselves about using all of the categories all of the time. Think of it more as a mental framework or a guide to ensure that we understand that our intention should be to extend this feeling of loving kindness toward all beings. It's important to remember that the sentiment that underpins this whole process and practice is the understanding that because things are always changing, beings are always subject to the potential for suffering. As a result, their actions necessarily are striving toward the ending of this suffering, even when we cannot understand them or when mistakes are made. But the general idea is we should try our best, even when we don't agree or don't understand, to find some compassion, even if it is just to develop our own mindfulness practice.